Hey everybody, all right, so a video on the WHO Essential Medicine list and the news that came out of it, I guess about early September 2025. So this is a request from one of our members. So there's a couple different things we're going to cover. What is this Essential Medicines list? What happened? What are the changes that are made? Some of the controversy, which probably could be its own video, but it's juicy. What happens now, and then where you can read a little bit more. So the WHO Essential Medicines list has been around since 1977. I got my notes just to be correct on that. So it's been around since the 70s, since bell bottoms and disco. It's updated every 2 years, and the core list, and there's a couple of different subvariants of the list, but the core list is meant to be the minimum medicines needed for a basic healthcare system. There's other lists. There's the C list, which is for children. But we won't get into that. There's basically the list of medicines that if you're running at least a basic healthcare system, you should probably be stocking. Now, the two big changes that happened relevant for us in the latest revision are the inclusion of rapid-acting insulin analogues, and then also some of the changes that happen around GLP-1s. So the insulin analog story, this time around, there was a submission by the group T1 International, to include rapid-acting insulin analogs. So specifically, the insulins, we'll give the non-brand name first. So Lispro, Aspart, and glucine. So if you buy them over the counter, you're probably going to know them as Humalog, that's Eli Lilly's, Novolog, that's Novo's, and Apidra, which is Sanofi's. So there was a long back and forth, and I do notice that it seemed to come out like a bit later. It wasn't even on the press release, which makes me think is a bit controversial, but they're included. So they are now on the list of the essential medicine list. We'll get into what that means a little bit later. GLP-1s has also been controversial. So they don't have a blanket inclusion of GLP-1s like Ozempic, but I'm looking at my notes to be correct on this. They do include GLP-1s for adults who have type 2 diabetes and also cardiovascular disease or chronic kidney disease and a BMI over 30, which is most nations' measure of obesity. But they are not included for generalized obesity without comorbidities. So not as much as I think some people, and certainly some companies would be hoping for, but then also it's not nothing. So what's the controversy here? All right, so this goes on for like a long while. Now, a lot of us in the patient community are in favor of analogs, and I myself are included in that. I wrote an article, which I'll link in the description, with Mark and Sana on why they should be on the list. But it kind of comes down to a lot of us have lived on both, what the brands call human insulin, which I think is kind of a misnomer because it's not created from humans. But anyway, stuff like NPH, stuff like Mix, stuff like R. What do they also used to be called? I think they're called different things in different countries. In Canada, they used to be called Toronto, I think, for a while. Anyway, the stuff that you have to do this with the vial for a lot of reasons. Okay, so you get more lows. And I know like that's kind of the controversy because like a lot of the people who've been defending not including analogs and saying like, well, human's good enough, you do get more lows, right? And there's like a lot of literature to support that, but then there's a lot of just patient testimony to support that. I myself have experienced that. The other thing too is there was an argument that like, well, analogs are like a lot more expensive than the stuff like N and NPH and all that sort of thing. But interestingly, Brazil and Dr. Mello and team kind of showed that, well, no, actually, they were actually get the price of analogs down to non-analog as well. And if you look at work by Driz and Melissa Barber, the actual manufacturing costs are pretty much minimal between the two. Like we're talking like a couple dollars for a vial. Now, when you start getting into like pens and all that, but that's another story. But this is kind of an emblematic of a problem that patients have been facing where we kind of go to certainly the WHO essential medicine list, that sort of process, but then larger processes in general, where a lot of us are medical doctors and PhDs and all that sort of stuff, and we get kind of hit back with like, well, this Cochrane reviews showed that there is like almost no difference, and then you look at the reviews sometimes and it's like, okay, well, it's still like a 1 or 2% difference in HbA1c. That's not nothing. I mean, that's pretty big. And then also stuff like, well, it's just lows, like, oh, it's just hypos and all that sort of stuff. And I almost never see the sort of line of reasoning from people who actually live with diabetes, like, actual clinical researchers who live with diabetes. And I think there's probably an underestimation of that. And certainly when I was at WHO, I argued for that too. Anyway, we'll get into that. But yeah, so analogs are there, and long-acting analogs was also kind of controversial. So that was 2 years ago as well. That was like the previous revision, but also long-acting insulin analogs are now on the list. Okay, so what happens now? Well, a lot of certainly low and middle income countries base a lot of their decisions about what to procure based on the WHO essential medicine list. They don't have to follow it. I mean, basically that's the WHO, right? It's meant to be this advisory thing. It doesn't command countries what to do, but certainly in some countries, the whole team on diabetes is one person. I mean, the whole non-communicable diseases in general could be one person. So it's usually a pretty good thing for trying to get new medicines into national formularies. The other thing too is it opens up a pathway called pre-qualification. So the idea that companies can submit to the WHO being a pre-qualified medicine, and there's a number of steps you take by that, but basically it's a form of like, a thumbs up that like this company produces pre-qualified medicine, which is of high quality and is worthwhile purchasing, certainly at the national level. Now, if you look at the actual decision itself, there's some kind of interesting language, I would say passive-aggressive language about, like, oh, well, we did see a lot of stuff about lows, but that was kind of spurious, or I forget the exact, thing, but a lot of it was around, like, well, the market's moving there anyway. So a lot of people, myself included, if you're buying with your own money, you don't buy stuff like NPH and mix. You buy stuff like these insulin analogs. I mean, myself, I'm buying Humalog and Tresiba, with my own money. And like, yeah, I could probably save more by buying NPH, but I think I would have a lot more lows and my life would be a lot worse. But the idea is that like a lot of these manufacturers are moving out of that space, and you certainly see in South Africa, a couple other countries, the availability of the 1980s era insulin is kind of being phased out, and the more modern 1990s era insulin is kind of coming in. But that's another video as well. But the idea is that, and you can see that in the reasoning as well, that they are hoping this produces more competition. So some of the new entrants coming in, like China and India, will come in. That's the hope. And then with that more market-based competition, the price will go down. Now, whether or not that happens, we'll see. Probably would take a bit more prodding than just an email list, but it's good. So that was it. There's a lot more I can get into, but if you want, come to our next meeting. It'll be October 25th. You can ask me there. And also, a lot of the people who have actually been involved in the process on the patient side will get into more of the story. But it has been an interesting one, and it shows that patients have power, patients have expertise, and this was actually recognized by the committee that the WHO struck. So yeah, don't listen to the naysayers. It's a big win, I think, for patients, and yeah, hopefully there's more to come. So I hope you found that helpful. Follow, like, and subscribe. Also follow us on LinkedIn, and we got a WhatsApp going on too. And I'll hope to see you around. All right, take care. Bye-bye.